Please welcome Al Roker.
Wow, well, after that, I think I'm just going to go home, because I can't top that. That gives us something to think about as we go forward in this, and I'm just really honored to be here and humbled. For those of you who don't know, I'm on the Today Show in the morning. It's on NBC, seen on NBC 6 here in New York. Thanks so much for that tepid response. That was really underwhelming. But we're hoping that things pick up as we go. But don't worry, it's only 7 minutes, so you won't have time for your butt to go numb. Anyway, it's interesting. When I first started, when somebody says it's interesting, it rarely is. It's like when they say, it's funny. And if I have to tell you it's funny, it's not. But I started doing television weather in 1974. Most of you weren't born in 1974, but when we started doing television weather, it was usually at the end of the newscast. There was a black and white loop of a satellite picture, and that was about it. But the fact is that the television weather segment, on both local news and network news, has become something more. Technology has allowed us to bring more information to you much more quickly. Oh, wow, there are people up in the balcony there. That's nice. Hi, how are you? I'm going to do a disappearing dime trick for you a little later. But the idea that our weather is become much more, that we're looking at it in a much bigger picture. Everybody is talking about the climate. What is our climate? How does it affect us? How does it make our lives better or worse? Well, the fact is, we have to tell people. Now, our job in the mornings, and for your local weather people in the afternoons and evenings, we give you a forecast. But now it's more than that, because our weather is being affected by the climate. Many times they were thought separately, but now they are one and the same. For example, I'm from New York City, but one of the things New York City and Miami have in common, sea level rise. Both cities in the next 40 years will have to spend about $4 billion to raise roads, to change drainage systems, to put in more pumps, to put in more seawalls, to protect from a rising sea level. Why? Because as our planet warms, our ice caps are melting and our sea levels are rising. At the NBC News Climate Unit, we have gone to the Arctic, and we have seen in Alaska our country's first climate refugees. As sea level rise melts the permafrost, the very foundation of these indigenous peoples' lands, and they've had to move further inland, away from where they have been literally for centuries. We look at out west, fire season. Well, it's no longer a fire season, it's just a fire year. Non-stop wildfires. We just reported 2 days ago that it looks like for the third year in a row, and it's only happened twice in the last 60 years, that there will be 3 La Niñas in a row. The La Niña being the cooling of the Pacific waters. Why do we care about that? We care about it because it means more wildfire and more drought out west. It means stronger tornadoes in the midsection of the country, and it means more rapidly intensifying hurricanes along the Gulf Coast and making their way up along the eastern seaboard. And make no mistake, even if you don't live along a coast, what we have seen now, rainstorms that are producing 30% more rain than they were 30 years ago. All of this with a rapidly warming climate, warming oceans, and those combine to bring this witch's brew of what we call climate change to our shores. And not just here, but globally. And when you think about it, you think, oh, well, it's rain or it's a bigger snowstorm. It's more than that. It's our very security. A recent study from the U.S. Department of Defense lists climate change as the #1 threat to Homeland Security. And when you think about it, over 70% of US military installations are where? Along shorelines. And so now the Department of Defense is working on hardening military installations, not just in the United States, but all around the world because of climate change. For example, here in the US alone, last year, we had $20 billion plus weather/climate events. That's the third largest number of climate events in the last 10 years. And in fact, in the last 10 years, 7 years in a row, we've had $10 billion weather events. In fact, last year, Hurricane Ida, $75 billion in damage just on Hurricane Ida alone. So as we look at this, we have had a very robust weather department at NBC News. But a few years ago, our management said, we need to look at this on a more holistic approach. And so our NBC News climate unit was formed. We have an executive producer, Aaron McGarry, and we have producers, we have associate producers, meteorologists, climate people who are looking at this. And what I like, what I find fascinating about our news organization is that we have different units within our news department. We have a business and tech unit. We have a medical unit. We have an investigative unit. We have a racial justice unit. And guess what? Climate impacts every one of those units because they impact all of our lives. If there is a major hurricane that disrupts supply chains, fuel supplies, different things like that, well, that means that businesses are going to be affected. Technology is affected. Climate touches that. By and large, communities of color are more affected and are placed closest to hazardous waste sites and polluting industries in this country than anybody else. That's racial justice. And when it comes to warming climate, allergy seasons go longer, more pestilence, more pests, mosquitoes, all sorts of problems arise due to a warming climate. And that affects our health. That touches our medical unit. Climate touches every part of our lives. And that's why we feel that it is so important to cover this really, this is the existential threat to our survival. It's not all doom and gloom. We try to make sure we let people know that there are solutions here. But our job is day in and day out, make sure we let people know that this is a real problem. We don't try to create hysteria. What we do try to do is bring information that affects your lives. How we can do things to change this climate curve that we're on. Can we electrify our transportation? Can we maybe bring different food sources? For example, one of the things, listen, I'm a big meat eater, but meat is not good for our planet. And so instead of making it the focal point, we try to make it, maybe it's a little less of a focal point. When we think about something as simple as an almond, it takes 1 gallon of water to produce 1 almond. It takes 5 gallons of water to produce a walnut. If you take the 1 year of water it takes to produce the California almonds that are exported to other countries, that could provide 3 years of water for residents and businesses for the city of Los Angeles. And it's those items, it's those things that we try to bring to our viewers, that not to demonize any one industry, but to say, how do we change it? How do we rethink what we're doing? And that is why we do what we do at the NBC News Climate Unit. And what was interesting is when I first started talking about climate, I won't say with our current management, but in previous folks, they say, oh, nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear about that. It's doom and gloom. They don't care. Well, guess what? Our audience cares. You care. That's why you're here. But folks all across the country, and really all around the world, care about this. Why? Well, because we know our climate is changing. But even more importantly, our younger generation knows. I've got a daughter who's 24. I've got a son who's 20. I've got a daughter who's in her early 30s. And every one of them talk at our dinner table, if they're at the dinner table. It's a sad story. Anyway, they talk about climate, how things are changing. No matter where I go, people come up to me and they ask about it. They care about it. And guess what? Consumers, especially younger consumers, are demanding that the businesses that they take part in, that the people they deal with, that the people they work for are good stewards of our climate. They want to know that this is important because it's important to them, because they're the ones who are going to be inheriting this planet. And so we try to give solutions. We talk about, the national parks. I just had the opportunity and privilege of interviewing President Barack Obama about the national parks. He's got a series on Netflix that looks not just at the U.S. national parks, which really, we were the first country to have a national park back in 1882. And we've exported that all over the world. And our national parks, both locally, nationally, globally, are buffers for our climate. And taking care of those places is a sacred trust. We have to do that. Thinking about more weather-resistant landscaping, that doesn't use as much water. Planting crops that are more susceptible, they're less susceptible to disease and heat and drought. We have to think outside the box, and that's what's so great about a conference like this. I am actually hopeful about our climate. When we put our minds to something, we can do it. You think back 20, 30 years ago, everybody was concerned about the hole in the ozone layer. That radiation was reaching dangerous levels on Earth because of that hole, that protective ozone layer was being deteriorated. And then, on a global level, we made a choice to eliminate the chemicals that were harming that oh-so-thin layer that protected us. And guess what? That hole is just about gone. So can we do it? Yeah, we can. But it's going to take action, demanding action from our politicians on a local, state, and federal level, that this is not something that is to be politicized, that this affects all of us, no matter what political stripe you are, where you are, racially. Some people are, obviously, as we mentioned, more affected than others. But what's important is that we have to do this together, because if we don't, the very ideals that Cheyenne talked about 5 minutes ago will be for naught, because this is our moment. We can do this. We still have some time, but we have to make sure that we, as a people, nationally and globally, do something about this. And that's why I am so proud to be part of the NBC News Climate Unit, because we are not only going to lay out the problems, but we're also going to help with solutions. That's what people want. They want solution-based reporting, and that's what we try to do. And I will say rather proudly that I think we're far ahead of our competitors when we do this. And listen, I would love for them to pass me by, and then we could pass them by, because everybody would benefit from it. But in the end, we all win if we all pull together. And I just want to say that I think that being here in Miami, a city and an area, South Florida is one of the ground zeros for climate. And people are getting things done here. People are coming together to get it done. And that's what we can do. So I hope you will join me in trying to come up with these solutions. And you know what? That's why we're here, because we want to hear from folks like you who have great ideas, who have great thoughts, And there's no idea that's too small or too out of the box to consider, because you never know where that's going to happen, because our planet is at stake. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.